On the outside, an exemplary marriage. On the inside, a theater sustained by lies. She knew everything, every betrayal, every excuse. But instead of confronting him, she engineered her exit with dignity and silence. What he never knew is that she stayed for a reason no one could ever imagine. And when the truth came out, not even death could prevent her redemption. A story about self-love, children, lies, and an unexpected reunion with the past. For everyone who has loved too much and learned to love themselves first. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories of life, overcoming, and secrets that change destinies. Watch until the end. The last page changes everything I used to think that silence was a sign of peace. That when two people could go hours without saying anything and still seem okay, that was mature love. Today I know that silence can also be a minefield, and that I spent 15 years stepping between explosives, one at a time, knowing exactly where they were, but pretending not to see them. Because yes, I knew everything. People always looked at us with admiration. The perfect couple, they would say. At dinners, family parties, in the hallways of our children's school, we were the two that everyone pointed to as an example of stability. But what no one saw, what no one ever suspected, was that behind those rehearsed smiles and public hugs, there was a show. And I was the only one who knew the script by heart, because I was the one who wrote every scene. We met when we were young, almost teenagers. I was 21, and he was 23. I was in my final year of business school, and he worked at the same co-working space where I was doing my internship. We literally bumped into each other in the kitchen, when I spilled coffee on his shirt and offered him my tissue with shaking hands. He smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't let you know when it appears, but never leaves your mind. We started dating soon after. He was funny, articulate, one of those men who knows how to make you feel like the only woman in the room. I was more reserved, analytical, suspicious by nature. But with him, everything seemed easy, natural, too fast. And maybe that was my first mistake. We got married 2 years later. We rented a small apartment downtown, gathered furniture from family donations, and improvised our first Christmas with half-lit lights. He still made jokes. I still laughed out loud. And it wasn't until our first child was born that the tone of the house changed. His work required traveling, at first short, then longer. When he returned from a week in Belo Horizonte, I realized I had brought something else in my suitcase besides my clothes. The smell of a sweet perfume I had never used. I washed everything in silence. I didn't ask him anything. But that night, while he was sleeping, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at his face for hours, as if by observing in silence I could find the answer I needed. I already knew. I just didn't want to confirm it. From then on, the clues began to multiply. Calls he answered outside the house, discreet laughter on the cell phone, absences disguised as urgent meetings. An ordinary woman would have confronted him, shouted, cried. Not me. I wrote down every detail, every name that appeared unintentionally, every new perfume that appeared out of nowhere. You may be wondering, why did I stay? The answer is not simple, and it doesn't fit into a label like emotional dependence or fear of being alone, because the truth is that I had a plan, and that plan required time, patience, and above all, silence. Over the next few years, I learned to make myself invisible to him, but still visible to the world. I was the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the woman who organized birthday parties and knew the name of every teacher her children had. All the while, I watched him grow further apart with each passing day, and with each hidden betrayal, I kept proof, printed emails, screenshots of messages, hotel receipts, even notes left in my pants pocket. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. There was one day in particular that marked a turning point. I was leaving the pediatrician's office with our youngest daughter in my arms. She had a fever. She was pale and limp. And when I called him, desperate, asking for help, he said he was in an urgent meeting. But I could hear music in the background, female voices, laughter. And at that moment, looking at my daughter's warm face leaning against my shoulder, I knew he was no longer part of my family, but I still needed him to believe otherwise. It was from that point on that I began to build my way out, piece by piece. I started studying at night. I took online courses. I built a portfolio. I quietly created a network of contacts, all while he thought I was just watching TV shows in the living room while the kids slept. On subsequent birthdays, we continued to take pictures together, he with his arm around my waist, I with my practiced smile. But inside, each flash was a reminder of what I was about to do, because while he kept lying, I kept accumulating power, until the day came when I discovered not only who he was with, but what that woman represented. And that's when everything fell apart. Not because I was jealous, but because she wasn't a stranger. And that's when you understand why I endured it for so long, why I never confronted him, and why, deep down, I've never been deceived. Her name was Julia, and the most bitter detail of all is that I knew her. Not only did I know her, I trusted her. She was my friend, one of those who come to your house, who sit on the couch, who help you choose the color for the baby's bedroom wall. One of those who picks up your child and says, he has his father's smile, and you pretend not to notice the long look she gives him, as if she had already memorized that face too much for someone she shouldn't. I found out by chance. One day, while I was looking through the folders on his computer looking for a bill he said he had lost, I opened a folder called Travel Budget. It had nothing to do with work. They were photos from a weekend in the countryside. Photos of her. Photos of the two of them. Them in a cabin, laughing. Them on a trail. Them on the porch, hugging, with the same smile he had used with me in the first year of their marriage. And then I knew. This was not just another betrayal. This was another life. A parallel one. One that was perhaps more real than the one he pretended to have with me. I closed the folder. I didn't cry. I had been through the pain for years. Now it was something else. It was as if something inside me had gone silent for good, and in its place had come a dangerous calm, a surgical clarity. That night, I put the kids to bed and stared out the kitchen window, where my own reflection seemed like a stranger. I was tired of pretending, but the time was not right yet. I needed to finish what I started. And the truth? I needed her, Julia. In the days that followed, I began to observe her more closely. At gatherings with friends, she avoided looking at me. She always found an excuse to leave early. Her guilt spilled over into her gestures. I, on the other hand, was impeccable. And when she asked me, with that bitter smile, how my marriage was, I answered in the sweetest voice I could muster. We've never been better. But what she didn't know is that I had already started preparing my final move. A silent project, invisible to everyone's eyes, built day after day. I started transferring small amounts of money from our joint account to a savings account in my name. I created a health plan just for me and the boys. I researched schools in another neighborhood. I visited properties to rent. And I looked for lawyers, discreetly, under various pretexts. One of them said to me a phrase that echoed for days. You are more prepared than anyone I've ever seen come in here. In front of him, I continued to be the same. So much the same that he didn't even realize I was no longer there. My body still shared the bed with him. My soul, no. He thought he was still fooling me. But I was the one fooling everyone. Until one day, something unexpected happened. He came home early, found me in the kitchen, and hugged me from behind. An old gesture, almost forgotten. I froze. He whispered, "You've been amazing. I wanted you to know that. Even through the ups and downs, I never stopped loving you." That's when I understood. He was feeling it. Maybe he didn't know exactly what, but something had changed. Maybe it was the way I walked differently, the way my gaze no longer lingered on his. Maybe it was the fact that, for the first time, he no longer recognized me, because I was no longer the woman he had betrayed without fear. I was someone about to turn the page, and he could feel it, even if he didn't understand it. That night I had a dream. I was on a long road, alone, and in front of me were 2 doors. One had a sign that said, "Uncertain future." The other said, "Comfort zone." I woke up sweating, but at peace. The next morning I got a message. It was from her. "Julia, we need to talk. I can't take this situation anymore." It was the first time she had approached me directly, without disguises, without mincing words. And it was at that moment that I realized the time had come, because I had something to tell her too. And when she knew the truth, nothing would be the same again. I met her at a low-key cafe, far from the neighborhoods where we were usually seen. I chose a table near the window, where I could see the door. I don't know why, but my heart was calm. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I just wanted to end this my way. She arrived a few minutes later. She looked different, thinner, with bags under her eyes. She seemed smaller, shrunken into herself, but she still tried to smile when she saw me, as if she were holding on to the hope that there would still be room for an apology. I didn't give her any room. "Julia," I said, with my head held high, "thank you for coming." She sat silently. She avoided my gaze. She fidgeted with her hands. For a moment I thought she was going to cry. But no, she was determined to speak first. "I never meant for this to happen," she began, her voice low, almost a whisper. "You have to believe me. It was a mistake. A lot of mistakes, I know. But it didn't start out the way you think. And I can't live like this anymore. Pretending. I lost control. And when I realized it was too late. Do you love him?" I interrupted. She choked, swallowed hard. Then she shook her head hesitantly. "I don't know. I think so. I thought so. But now, everything seems dirty." I was silent for a few seconds. Then I reached into my purse and took out a small folder. I placed it on the table. She looked at it as if it were a bomb. "Here are copies of everything. Printouts, dates, receipts, photos. You're not the only one who knows how to pretend, Julia. I've been preparing for this moment for years. And do you know what's most curious?" I leaned my body a little over the table, looking into her eyes. "I never hated them. Neither did he. Nor you." Her eyes widened, but she said nothing. "What you and he did served to show me who I really was. It showed me the strength I thought I didn't have. And most importantly, it made me remember why I got into this marriage. And why, even after finding out everything, I stayed." She frowned. "Did you stay because of the children?" "In part, yes. But I also stayed because I wanted something he never realized. And neither did you. I wanted freedom. But not the freedom to leave. The freedom to build my way out safely. I'm not a woman who breaks everything and runs away. I'm the one who leaves with all the pieces organized, leaving the board to fall upside down after I'm no longer in the game." She looked at the folder in fear. "Are you going to use this against him?" "No. I'll only use it if necessary. This isn't about revenge, it's about protection. I won't destroy his image, but I also won't let him use his children as a shield when I'm gone." She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. Just stay away. Definitely. Don't try to justify what you did. Don't try to console me. What you've been through will haunt you both, and it has nothing to do with me. Now, I'm going to mind my own business. But if you try to get close to the kids, if you try to come into my house again as a friend, I won't hesitate to show you everything." She nodded silently, and when she left, for the first time in years, I felt light, like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. Not because I stood up to her, but because I had finally said what I needed to say. That same night, I waited for him to arrive. I had my suitcase packed and my clothes sorted. The children were already at my mother's house. When he came in, he found only a letter on the table. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. In the letter, I wrote just one sentence. "You didn't lose your wife. You lost the privilege of being a part of my life." I left. But what he did after that, no one expected. The following week, he showed up at the school gates, desperate, trying to talk to the boys. He called my name loudly, begging for a chance to talk. He said he regretted it, that Julia was a mistake, that he hadn't been able to sleep since he read the letter. But what he didn't know was that I had also left another letter, for her. And it was this second letter that triggered the real turnaround, because inside, I told what he hid from the two of them. In the letter I left for her, there were no threats, no accusations. There were truths, the kind that no one wants to hear. But that, once said, never let the person sleep the same way again. I told her that he hadn't started cheating on me with her, that Julia wasn't the first, that before her there had been at least 3 other women. One of them even got pregnant, but he convinced the girl to stop everything and paid off so that the matter would never reach me. I found this out in one of the bank statements that he forgot to delete from his cell phone, and I confirmed it in an email exchange that he didn't realize he had synchronized with the computer in the room. I read it all, word for word. I also wrote to her that he used every moment of fragility as an excuse, that he said he was going through crises, stress, loneliness, and the need to feel like a man again. That each of these stories always had the same structure. He said he was the victim of a suffocating marriage, a cold wife, a loveless home, and that she probably heard the same phrases, because that's what he did. He copied feelings. What perhaps hurt Julia the most, and I know because she responded to me with an email filled with silence between sentences, was discovering that even in the most intimate moments, he lied. And that even the gifts she received, the flowers, the necklaces, the wines, had been bought in the same place and in the same tone as the ones he gave me. He was a repeater of affection, a collector of versions of himself, and none of them were true. But I didn't send this letter to hurt. I sent it to be released, because I didn't want to come out of this story as the betrayed woman. I wanted to come out as the woman who chose to no longer put up with lies. And I wanted, if possible, for her to also choose something better for herself, even if it was out of anger. In the following days, what I saw was the implosion of a structure that for years had been sustained by appearances. He sent me messages every day, some long, others desperate, most of them begging for a meeting, saying he would go to therapy, that he would change, that he would sell his car, that he would give up everything for me. But I was no longer the woman who needed convincing. I was the woman who was already gone, even before I walked out the door. And then he made his final mistake. He showed up at my mother's house. It was Saturday. I was in the backyard, watering plants with my daughter. I heard the doorbell, and before I could get there, he was already coming in, as if he still had the right to do so. My mother tried to stop him. He kept shouting my name. He told me that his children had the right to see him, that I couldn't erase 15 years with a letter. You erased it with lies, I replied firmly, when I finally placed myself between him and my daughter. He cried. For the first time in a long time, I saw him broken, but it didn't shake me, not because of pride, but because those tears were no longer mine to console. I talked to the boys later, without anger, without manipulation. I told them the truth as best they could understand, and I made it clear that they were not forbidden from seeing their father, but that now, visits would happen under different terms. Time has taught me that a mother's love also means protecting them from what confuses them, from what hurts them, even when the hurt comes from someone they love. He tried to rebuild his own image. He posted old photos on social media, wrote emotional texts, and even changed his biography to something more profound. But it was too late. Because it's not about what you show. It's about who you are when no one is looking. Months passed. I moved to another city. I started over. I made new friends. I started giving short lectures on emotional reconstruction, without ever mentioning names. Just stories. Stories like mine. Stories of women who resist in silence and who one day scream with footsteps. Because yes, walking away is also a kind of scream. But it was at one of these lectures that someone asked me, "Have you ever truly loved him?" And for the first time, I hesitated. Because maybe, the cruelest thing about all of this is that yes, I loved him. Intensely. Completely. Until the last piece of me. And it was precisely for that reason that I knew when it was time to leave. But my new beginning still had a surprise in store, something I never imagined I would find again. Right there, the new town was smaller, quieter. It had cobblestone streets and park benches named after people I didn't know, the kind of place where everyone greeted each other, even if they didn't remember where they'd met. It was exactly what I needed, a gentle anonymity, a fresh start with no previous history. I managed to rent a single-story house with a simple but cozy garden. I painted the walls with the colors I always wanted and that he never let me have. I put up pictures with phrases that reminded me of who I was before he forgot about me. The boys adapted quickly. The school was smaller. The teachers were more present. In a short time, they already had friends, clubs, plans for the weekend. And I was relearning how to smile alone. I started working at an NGO that supported women in vulnerable situations. There, I would tell stories, sometimes my own, sometimes pieces of them in other voices. I would help with legal advice, psychological support, or simply sit there and listen. It was as if each fragment I stitched together in another woman's life was also mending another piece of mine. Until, one afternoon, he appeared. But not him. Not the man who had betrayed me. It was another man, one I hadn't seen in over 20 years. His name was Gabriel, and he was my first love. We met in our sophomore year of high school. We exchanged secret notes, little letters folded in 4 with underlined phrases. He waited for me outside school on his bike. He took me to the movies for the first time. He kissed me in the rain, and then he disappeared from my life the very day he received a scholarship to study abroad. We never spoke again. I never heard from him again. And now, there he was, standing in the reception area of the NGO. Gray hair, unshaven, tired eyes, but still with that sparkle I can't forget. He was there to make a donation. And when he saw me, he froze. Clara? It took me a few seconds to recognize it, as if my memory needed to stitch the years back to the boyish face I had saved. Gabriel? The silence between us lasted an eternity and a half. Then he laughed. And I laughed too. And in that moment, the world seemed suspended, as if everything I had experienced up until that point had been just a prologue to that reunion. We talked as if time had stopped. I discovered that he had returned to Brazil after the death of his parents, that he was now a university professor, and that he had spent the last few years taking care of his younger sister, who was battling a degenerative disease. He said that he had no children, nor was he married, and that lately he had been missing someone who knew his story before he left. "And you?" he asked, with that tone of voice that respects the silence before the answer. "Are you happy?" I took a deep breath. "I'm rebuilding, one brick at a time." He smiled, and it was in that smile that I felt something strange, familiar, as if, suddenly, all the weight of the past was preparing me for that exact moment. Each other times, first by chance, then by choice. Long coffees, walks around the square, conversations about children, frustrations, fears. For the first time, I felt like I could be another woman. Not the betrayed wife, not the tired mother, but me, whole. The boys liked him. They said he seemed to understand everything. Math, soccer, and even Pokemon. I just watched silently this man who didn't ask for space, but offered it, who didn't demand affection, but cared. And the closer he got, the more I remembered what it was like to be loved without having to put myself aside. But just when I was starting to believe that I deserved a new love, I received an unexpected message. It was my ex-husband's. "I'm sick. I need to talk to you. It's serious." For a second I hesitated to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. What he told me would change everything. It took me hours to open the message completely. I read the first part, closed the screen. I went back. I opened it again. My heart no longer beat with despair when I saw his name, but there was something in that tone that bothered me. It was no longer arrogant. It was not accusatory. It was resigned. "Clara, I found out 2 weeks ago. I didn't want to involve you, but now the boys need to know. I have leukemia, advanced. I've already had tests and I'm going to start chemotherapy next week. I don't know what it's going to be like. I needed to tell you. I'm sorry for everything. I sat in the kitchen for hours, staring into space. It was as if the world had lost its sound for a few minutes. My children were asleep. The house was peaceful. But inside me, a silent war was beginning. Not for him, but for the boys. The next day, I made an appointment with my therapist. I needed guidance. Someone to tell me if there was a right way to act in a situation where nothing seemed right. Clara, he said, you don't have to erase everything he caused you. But now, you can choose not to repeat it. That's liberating too. It's not about going back. It's about deciding what you want to carry. I talked to my children 2 days later. I explained it gently, without embellishments. They reacted differently. The youngest cried. The oldest was silent. Then he asked, "Is he going to die?" "We don't know. But he will fight." They wanted to see him, and I let them. The following week, we went to the hospital together. He was pale, weak. His eyes were sunken. His beard was unkempt. He was a diminished man. And for the first time in years, I felt sorry for him. Not for him, but for what he had become, for how much of himself he had lost. "Do you still hate me?" he asked, his voice weak. "No, I don't feel anything anymore. Just hope that you find peace before you go." We talked for a few minutes. Then he held my hand. "You knew everything, didn't you?" I nodded. "So why did you stay?" I looked into his eyes, and for the first time I told him the truth. Because I wanted to become strong enough to leave without destroying myself. And I only managed to do so when I stopped loving you. He cried, and I didn't. Because there was no more pain, only understanding. One that comes late, but still comes. As I was leaving the hospital, my children hugged me. One of them asked, "Are we going to have to go back to live with him?" "No, my love. We will just give love, but without forgetting who we are." I went home exhausted. Gabriel called me that night, and when I heard his voice, I cried for the first time in months. But it was a light cry, a relief, as if everything was finally being put in its right place. In the following months, I followed the treatment from afar. The children's visits became weekly. Gabriel understood. He never pressured me. He just stayed, present, whole. And that's how I realized the love I deserved wasn't the one that begged to be accepted. It was the one that looked at me even when I didn't say anything. And one morning in October, I got a call. He was gone. No note. No final speech. Just silence. And for the first time, an emptiness that didn't hurt me. But something was still missing. One last detail. One last piece in the puzzle of everything I experienced with him. And she was in the will. I was called by the lawyer 3 weeks after the funeral. I sat in that cold room where pictures of justice hung on the walls as reminders that sometimes the truth takes time, but it always finds a way to come out. When I walked in, he was alone. A gentleman with white hair, impeccable posture, and eyes that hid secrets beneath his glasses. He greeted me kindly and opened a folder. "Mrs. Clara, correct? Mr. Henrique's ex-wife." I nodded. "There is a clause in the will that directly involves you. He wrote it about a month before his death, in shaky but clear handwriting. It was written with witnesses and registered at the notary's office." I took a deep breath. I had no idea what to expect. Maybe he had left the boys some inheritance, or some belated confession. But nothing prepared me for what came next. He left you a notebook, and with it, a letter. He asked that it be delivered only after his death. The lawyer pushed the objects toward me. He said that it was the only way to say goodbye like a man. I picked up the notebook with trembling hands. The cover was plain, dark leather, with his initials on it. The letter was folded, held together with a rubber band. I opened it slowly. "Clara, if you're reading this, it's because I couldn't personally apologize with the depth you deserved. And maybe I never would have. You were always stronger than me, more honest, more real. This notebook contains all the letters I never gave you. I started writing after you left, one a week, like a ritual. In it, I wrote everything, my guilt, my confessions, my frustrated attempts to be better. And most of all, I wrote about you, about how you changed me, and about how I failed. I hope that one day, when the pain is bearable, you'll read it, not to understand me, but to free yourself completely. With sincere repentance, Enrique. I stood there, with the notebook on my lap, not knowing whether to open it or not. Part of me wanted to forget. Another part wanted to understand. But most of me just wanted peace. It took me a week to work up the courage. I read a letter a day, some short, some long, some full of anger, some full of guilt. In one, he admitted that he cheated out of fear, that my light blinded him, that my strength reminded him of his own weakness. But there was one letter that broke me. The last one. Clara, I know you know about Julia, and I know you knew about the others. And now I also know that you stayed, for the love of our children, but mainly for the love of yourself. You wanted to leave in one piece, and you did. You won. And if there is something that I can leave as true in this life, it is this. You were the bravest woman I have ever known, and even though I didn't deserve it, you were the greatest love of my life. I closed the notebook. I cried, not for him, but for everything that could have been, and wasn't, for the woman I had to become to survive, and for the woman who today could finally live. A few months later, Gabriel invited me to travel. He said there was a house in Parati, simple, facing the sea. I accepted, not as an escape, but as an arrival. On the beach, at sunset, he hugged me from behind and whispered, "Does it still hurt?" No, now it's just a scar. And that night, lying next to him, for the first time in a long time, I slept without fear of waking up, because I finally understood that pain is not the end. It is just the path for those who decide to truly start over. Today, when I look back, I don't feel angry, nor regret. What I see is an old movie playing on the wall of my memory, a movie that no longer hurts to watch, but that I carry like a scar on my heart, the kind we can't hide, because it reminds us of everything we've overcome. I still keep the notebook, not out of attachment, but as a reminder that even the most painful truths can turn into turned pages, that love is not about losing yourself in the other person, it is about finding yourself, even in the midst of loss. The boys have grown up. They are fine. They are respectful, sensitive, and each one has learned from all this in their own way. Sometimes they ask about their father. They talk about him fondly, without idealizing. And that is enough for me, because I managed to protect them without lying. I told the truth gently, without poisoning. Gabriel is still by my side. He never tried to be a hero. He never took advantage of my wounds. He was a presence, without pressure. With him, I learned that love is not noise. It is silent presence. It is constancy. Sometimes we wake up early and walk to the market, hand in hand. Other times we just read together on the couch, without saying anything. And in those moments I realize that it is not about starting all over again with someone else. It is about starting with another version of yourself. If I could leave just one message for anyone who hears my story, it would be this. Don't wait for someone to break you to rebuild yourself. But if that happens, don't just glue the pieces back together. Recreate yourself, stronger, lighter, more yours. Because in the end, faking a marriage for 15 years might seem like a waste, but choosing to get out of it in one piece, it's a victory that not even time can erase. It with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories of life, overcoming and secrets that change destinies.